Good morning, everyone. Please note that this Zoom session will be recorded and we are simultaneously live streaming on VICPP's Facebook page. We will be taking questions at the end. I will be monitoring questions on all platforms and will share with the panelists. And now I turn it over to President and CEO at the Commonwealth Institute, Ashley C. Kenneth. Ashley provides the vision, inspiration, and strategic management to achieve the organization's goals. Her work and passion to advance racial and economic justice maximizes the impact of TCI's policy analysis and legislative engagement and strengthens the Institute's partnerships. Take it away, Ashley.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Ayesha, and thank you all for joining us. Again, my name is Ashley Kenneth, and I am President and CEO at the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Analysis. Founded in 2006, TCI is a nonprofit organization that does policy research, analysis, and advocacy in order to advance racial and economic justice in Virginia. Our theory of change is grounded in an understanding that TCI is part of an ecosystem of policy advocacy organizations that have a shared vision for building power with communities of color and people with low incomes in order to dismantle old systems that continue to perpetuate racism and injustice and replace them with new inclusive systems of justice and opportunity. In that vein, we are proud to continue our partnership with the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, an organization that so strongly lives up to its own mission of advocating for social justice across a number of important issues in the Commonwealth. Together, we are releasing a report today at noon on the state of working Virginia. This report is the culmination of significant time and effort put forth by both staff in both of our organizations, and we're excited to share some of the highlights with you this morning. The report is not just a list of important facts and figures related to the workers in Virginia, but it's a call to action, and it's an invitation to look deeply at what the data is telling us. What's clear is that Virginia is a top 10 state when it comes to median household income, yet many workers, particularly workers of color, are still facing significant barriers to economic stability. We have and should take the opportunity to ensure that Virginia not only remains a top state for business, but becomes a top state for the workers that make business possible. I'll now turn things over to Mel Borja, the Worker Power Policy Analyst at TCI, and one of the key authors of the report. Mel works to build public knowledge about the benefits of collective bargaining in Virginia and partners with labor advocates to increase public support for strengthening worker rights at the local and state level. Mel?
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mel Borja, and as my colleague Ashley said, I'm the Worker Power Policy Analyst for the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Analysis, and I'm one of the authors of the report we are launching today. We are proud to have partnered with Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy as our new State of Working Virginia report. As we head into Labor Day weekend, this report outlines comprehensive and up-to-date research about workers' lives, as well as recommendations for advocacy and organizing. I want to take a few minutes today to walk through key data points in the report. Over the last 5 to 10 years, there have been some important policy strides centering issues of concern for workers, especially those paid low wages. Our next speaker will go into these wins in more detail, but I'd like to touch on just a few right now. In a major recent win, Virginia lawmakers made the State Earned Income Tax Credit, or the EITC, partially refundable, which will likely equate to a few $100s in additional refunds per qualifying family as early as next year. And we know that some progress has been made on the economic well-being of adults and children in the state who live in poverty. Available data shows that Virginia's overall poverty rate decreased to 9.9%, and the childhood poverty rate decreased to 13.4% in 2019. This demonstrates improvement over the course of the previous decade, but we should note that it's only by about 0.5%. Finally, and my colleague Freddy will discuss this in greater depth later today, the rate of people in Virginia without health insurance continues to go down, thanks in large part to Medicaid expansion that took place in 2019. The program now covers 1 in 5 people in Virginia. But our most recent data analysis shows that many workers are still facing barriers to economic stability, particularly for Black and Latinx Virginians who have faced longstanding racial discrimination in education, hiring, and wages. The slight overall wage gains made in the last year for all workers were eroded by record high inflation rates. And the new wage gap analysis in this report shows that wages for Virginia's Black workers have barely shrunk since 1979. Black workers in Virginia were paid 72 cents for every dollar a white worker was paid in 1979, and 74 cents for every dollar a white worker made in 2021. That's barely any change in the past 42 years. Additionally, the Hispanic wage gap is trending in the wrong direction. The wage gap between Hispanic and non-Hispanic white workers has actually widened from 72 cents for every dollar in 2001 to 68 cents for every dollar in 2021. In the face of this bleak outlook, unionization and worker organizing gives a lot to be hopeful for. In 2021, working people in a union were paid 20% more on average compared to their peers. In fact, union workers have made more than non-union workers in Virginia every year since at least 1979. The Commonwealth has a strong history of labor organizing by working people in Virginia. Workers have organized in the mines of Southwest Virginia, the shipyards in Newport News, Starbucks locations in Leesburg, hospitals in Charlottesville, textile factories in Danville, and more. The last several years have seen an acceleration of that trend, with significant gains made for local level public sector workers and private sector workers all over the Commonwealth in wages, benefits, and working conditions. The data also shows us the urgency around the lack of supports for workers, where Virginia is working to improve, and how far it has left to go. For example, we know that working families in Virginia do not have access to affordable childcare. Virginia is ranked 10 out of 50 states and the District of Columbia for most expensive infant care. A minimum wage worker would need to work full-time for about 32 weeks just to pay for one infant's childcare. Despite these costs, Virginia's childcare workers have a median income of $22,210, so they themselves struggle to get by. It is critical that childcare workers receive better compensation to remain in the field and provide a stable source of care for families. Fortunately, Virginia's childcare practices are changing to address at least some of the financial burden on families and childcare workers, which we detail in the report. Virginia also lags behind most other states in helping people who are unemployed. The fallout from the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic revealed not only the historic issues with the Virginia Employment Commission, but just how critical a robust unemployment insurance program is to allow workers to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. The data shows that the state of working Virginia is a complicated one. We really have made progress in the last several years that we can be proud of. But much more needs to be done if workers and their families are truly going to share in the Commonwealth's prosperity. So I'll now turn it over to our next speaker, Kim Bobo, Executive Director of the Interfaith Center for Public Policy, and another key author of the report. Kim is a nationally known promoter of social justice and expert on worker justice issues. She leads VICPP's advocacy, outreach, and development work. And Kim literally wrote the book on faith-based organizing and proceeded to author quite a few books on wage issues and community organizing as well. Take it away, Kim.
Good morning. Thank you, Mel. I'm Kim Bobo, as she said, the Executive Director of the Virginia Interfaith Center. We are the Commonwealth's largest faith-based social justice organization. Our mission is to engage people of faith and goodwill in advocating economic, racial, and social justice in Virginia's policies and practice. Based on our faith teachings, we have a special concern for the poor and the marginalized. In Virginia, most economically poor families have one or more people who are working, but they don't earn enough or have enough supports to lift them out of poverty. Consequently, for those of us who care about poverty, care about our neighbors, we must care about wages, benefits, and working conditions for Virginia's workers. So first, the good news. Virginia has made a lot of strides over the last few years under both Republican and Democrats toward improving conditions for lower wage workers. Some of the most significant improvements for workers include Medicaid expansion, which primarily assisted workers and their families in low wage jobs, raising the minimum wage, which has raised wages for several 100,000 workers, strong protections against wage theft, strong investments in job training, paid sick days for 30,000 home care workers, an important down payment on a broader standard. And just this last session, the governor signed a bill to improve Virginia's earned income tax credit, which will put $160 million more into the hands of low-income working families. These are important steps forward for workers and their families in Virginia. In the coming years, advocates who are concerned about poverty and workers in low-wage jobs will seek to protect these important strides forward. However, as the report clearly shows, what we've done thus far is not enough. The economy is growing, businesses are prospering, and yet many workers are not sharing in that prosperity. More must be done for all workers in low-wage jobs, and we must grapple with ways to address the income gaps for African American and Latinx workers. In the coming years, advocates for workers in low-wage jobs, traditional anti-poverty advocates, and increasingly business leaders will seek to improve Virginia's environment for workers. We believe we need to raise wages, especially for those in the lowest paid jobs. Increase supports for working people, setting standards for paid sick days and paid leave, continuing expansion on healthcare access, and addressing exorbitant childcare costs. We've got to stop wage theft. Workers deserve to be paid all their legally owed wages. Yesterday morning, I got a call from a fast food worker. He noticed that his pay stubs didn't quite add up to all the hours he worked. He started keeping track of all his log in and log out receipts. Come to find out, the employer was deducting for a break every day that wasn't ever taken. That cheated him about $35 a week, $1,800 a year. That's a lot of money for everyone, but especially for someone in a low-wage job. Wage theft is theft and should be taken seriously, but it's hard to do with just a few enforcement staff to protect all of Virginia's workers. And we need to revamp Virginia's unemployment system. We all know about the disaster that occurred at VEC during the pandemic, but the problems are not just pandemic related. Virginia needs to update systems and benefit offered to workers who become unemployed. And we need to allow workers to organize. If workers have the right to organize and engage in collective bargaining, free from harassment and intimidation, they will. Organized workers have better wages and benefits, which raise standards for all of us. The Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy and most other advocates concerned about poverty in Virginia support these kinds of policies. Polls consistently show that voters, both Democrats and Republicans, overwhelmingly support these policies. Virginia has made great strides for workers in the last few years. We look forward to working with the governor and members of the General Assembly to make Virginia the best state for both businesses and workers. Now, I'm delighted to partner with the Commonwealth Institute on this report. Over the years, we have regularly partnered with TCI because of their skilled analysis, their deep commitment to fairness and equity, and their strategic leadership. Thank you, TCI, for your work and your partnership. And now I'd like to introduce Freddy Mejia, who is the Deputy Director of Policy at TCI and plays a key role in the development and execution of TCI's policy, advocacy, and legislative engagement work. Freddy leads TCI's health policy efforts and supports TCI's immigrant justice work. Freddy.
Good morning, and thank you, Kim, for that warm introduction. Again, my name is Freddy Mejia, and I am the Deputy Director of Policy at the Commonwealth Institute. I join you today to share some key healthcare-related information from the State of Working Virginia report. I would like to once again thank the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy for their collaboration on this important document and for years of close partnership. Public policy decisions greatly impact access to affordable and comprehensive health coverage for Virginia workers. There is no better example than the decision made in 2018 to expand Medicaid. After years of advocates pleading with lawmakers to do the right thing by Virginia's working families, a policy decision gave hundreds of thousands of adults access to health coverage. Although this decision was long overdue, it was very timely because of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Medicaid expansion was and continues to be a lifeline for people who temporarily lost their employment, saw reduced hours, or worked low-wage jobs. Nearly 680,000 adults have health coverage today because of Medicaid expansion. According to current population survey data, the uninsured rate for non-elderly adults in Virginia has dropped from 12.7% in 2018 to 8.2% in 2021. That is the impact of public policy on working families across the Commonwealth. However, Virginia lawmakers still have work to do to ensure increased and continued access to healthcare coverage for Virginia workers. The anticipated end of the federal public health emergency in 2023 means that every person with Medicaid coverage must be redetermined for eligibility for the first time since the pandemic started. Without close collaboration from lawmakers, state agencies, and community organizations, Virginia families could be disenrolled from health coverage despite remaining eligible for Medicaid. In addition, people found ineligible must be connected to comprehensive health coverage options, such as those available on the ACA marketplace, if we have any hope to keep Virginia's uninsured rates low. Finally, it is essential to note that not all Virginians have benefited from Medicaid expansion. Thousands of working Virginians are denied access to affordable and comprehensive health coverage simply due to their immigration status. Workers with undocumented status are barred from enrolling in comprehensive health coverage through the ACA marketplace or Medicaid unless they are pregnant. This results in over 1 in 4 non-citizen adults living uninsured, compared to only 5% of their citizen counterparts being uninsured. But it does not have to be this way. Recent efforts to expand health coverage to all workers, regardless of immigration status, such as what has occurred in California, Oregon, and Colorado, should be explored to make sure all working people in Virginia can access comprehensive and affordable health coverage. Again, public policy decisions greatly impact the lives of working families in Virginia. We ask everyone to call on decision makers to preserve and build on this recent success so more working Virginians can meet their healthcare needs without sacrificing their financial well-being. Thank you. And now I'd like to shift gears and bring this data to life. The Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy has prepared a short video compilation of the personal accounts that everyday Virginia workers shared as part of the hashtag Good Airports campaign in partnership with SEIU Local 32 VJ. Because of the very real threat of retaliation workers face, all of the workers who contributed their stories chose to remain anonymous, hence the creative method of presentation. Please watch.
And now I'd like everyone to please welcome Reverend Dr. Anthony Fludd, Assistant Pastor of St. John's Church of God in Christ in Newport News, Virginia. He is also Vice Chair of the Board of Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy, where he is actively and deeply involved in many of VICPP's racial and economic justice initiatives at a grassroots level. Reverend.
Thank you, Ashley. I am glad to be with you on today. We are people of faith, are standing in the gap to give power to the truth for just wages are a moral right. There's a difference between just wages and unjust wages. A just wage enables a decent life for a worker and their household. There's a difference between moral and immoral. Anything moral is a work of God, and as the creator of us all, he's concerned about our economic well-being, and that's a work of grace. For where there is injustices, sin prevailing, grace much more abound. We have learned during this pandemic how many low-paid workers were willing to put themselves at great risk for their company and for their community, matter of fact, for us all. So let us recognize the many people whose work is a blessing to society, and yet they are struggling to care for their own family. Now, who is willing to speak the truth and stand in the gap to address low wages? Nothing happens without leadership who are willing to put themselves on the line when addressing one's economical welfare. To stand for labor rights or wage rights, economically, well-being is the best thing we all can do. Having living wage, being paid fairly for the service anyone provides is a hearing worth giving voice to. Any unfair practices in the workplace, whether it entails unfair wages or not, is toxic, and it spills out in every facet of our society. And this is certainly due to the moral failures. Yes, a moral failure affects everyone. You should not have to go to work every day thinking, how am I going to make enough money to put food on my table to feed my children and my family? Or how am I going to pay for my family's medical and healthcare needs, especially in these inflationary times, when who suffers the more? It's those who are economically disadvantaged. This is not only depressing, it's oppressing. It is a toxic and it's unwholeness. We learned from this pandemic how disproportionately low-income people, workers, have suffered from two evils: poor wages, not having enough to make ends meet, and having to come to work sick with no paid sick day leave to care for their sick family or themselves. Thank you, TCI. Thank you, Virginia Interfaith Center of Public Policy, for standing in the gap to give voice to a just cause. The common sense notion of fairness, as well as ethical concepts of justice go hand in hand. The concept that our needs should be a key determinant of resources allocation for health and economical well-being, especially for those suffering. That is just a right thing to do. The racial disparity has grown over the decades. We are moving in the wrong direction. Again, I say this is a moral issue. We must act. We must compel our legislators to act. Remember this, a just wage enables a decent life for a worker and their household. It enables future asset building. It provides basic social security for workers and their household. Its structures should be non-discriminatory. Just wages is not excess. It's only exhibit proportionally within a wider economic community. Wage reflects participation by workers. Wage consider performance, qualification, and the type of work. And it also supports trust in our society. I am totally in agreement with these references from the Center for Social Concerns. It is my prayer that we act. We must compel our legislators to act. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend. And thank you again to all of our speakers, Mel, Kim, Freddy. Thank you to Sherri and Ayesha for helping to make this press conference possible. The State of Working Virginia report goes live on both of our websites, on the Virginia Interfaith Center for Public Policy's website, as well as TCI's website, at a link that will be shared with you today. It goes live at noon, and registrants of this Zoom session will receive it in a follow-up email as well. For more questions, media requests, and to receive a copy of the report, please email VICPP's Director of Communications, Ayesha Taylor, at AyeshaGT at VirginiaInterfaithCenter.org, which is also going to be shared with you. The report will also go live again on TCI's website, and you can email TCI's Communications Director, Sherri Egerton, at Sherri@theCommonwealthInstitute.org for any questions that you may have about the report. And we will now open it up for questions. And along with Zoom, we're also simultaneously live streaming on VICPP's Facebook page, and Ayesha is monitoring all platforms for questions. So I'll turn it over to you, Ayesha, if there are any questions that have come in. But if you also have questions as we go throughout the rest of this program, please do put it into the chat or let Ayesha know. Thank you.
We've got a question. Dodashil, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing your last name properly. How will this report translate into legislative action, and how have you identified priorities for the upcoming General Assembly session?
I think it's a question for both me and for Ashley, so I'll take a stab first and let Ashley go next. In terms of how we decide, again, we look at all the options. We talk with legislators, we talk to our partners, we talk to constituents, and then our board ultimately makes the decision about what policies we will work on. We do believe that there are several policies recommended here that we will likely be working on. We've been leading for the last couple of years an effort around paid sick days. We will certainly do that. We will partner with Freddy and the HAVE coalition around healthcare improvements and ways we can move in that space. We're a part of the Virginia Promise Partnership Coalition on childcare. And so again, we'll be trying to move some of the childcare subsidy efforts forward. So again, there's a number of policies recommended here that at least will be in our agenda this coming year. Ashley?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. As Kim said, that there are a number of policy recommendations that are made in the report. Several of those issues TCI has already been a leader on and will continue to lead, particularly making sure that the minimum wage increase goes forth as planned to $15 an hour. We'll continue to work on increasing collective bargaining rights for workers, instituting a state paid family medical leave program. There are several areas that we'll continue to push on, but TCI also believes strongly that we need to work in consultation with not only our partner organizations at the state level, but also by consulting with impacted communities and workers who are living these issues every day. And so we will be having conversations with folks and determining, the issues that are priorities and how we want to move forward in the upcoming legislative session.
Thank you, Ashley and Kim. We're getting a lot of good questions. Amy Knowles, thank you for joining us. What can the average Virginian do to help lessen or do away with the wage gap?
Well, number one, you should work with TCI and the Virginia Interfaith Center to change these public policies. As we've shown in many examples, sort of the broadest, most effective ways to address racial gaps are through public policy. And so again, I think working with all of us to do that. But in addition to that, we all work in workplaces, we all sort of buy products, right? There are things we can do as individuals as well to make sure that we're not a part of the problem, that we are part of addressing racial gaps. And again, there's quite a few things you can do as individuals around supporting businesses that pay living wages, not supporting businesses that have a practice of wage theft. So again, there's things you can do individually, but in terms of public policies where we're going to have the biggest impact, you need to work with groups like us. You can't do this alone. Public policy advocacy is collective activity. It is not individual activity.
One thing I would like to add to Kim's answer, and again, I'm Mel Borja with the TCI, is that in addition to legislative policies that, or like I said in my remarks, union workers have consistently made more than their non-union counterparts in Virginia since at least 1979. In all of that wage gap data I gave, union workers made 20% more than their non-union counterparts last year. So in addition to legislative fixes, supporting local level collective bargaining efforts in your community for both public and private sector workers is another thing that Virginians can do to help address wage gaps that fall across racial, ethnic, and gender lines.
Okay. Anonymous attendee asks, were there any surprising finds that came up while researching the report?
Mel, I think that's you.
Yeah, so I think one thing that really surprised me was just how little the wage gap for Black Virginians versus white Virginians has moved, right? So it's only moved 2 cents since 1979, which I think it was really surprising when we ran that analysis. But then also, also for Hispanic workers, the gap is actually widening by 2 cents, I think was really shocking. The earliest data available we have for that is 2001, but still, since like 2 decades, the wage gap widening, I think, is really shocking. The report also details that women of color who are at the intersection of racism and sexism are hit the hardest by wage inequality in Virginia. And those numbers, I think that just them, not necessarily in how they've moved, but just the actual numbers themselves are quite shocking. Black women are paid just 59 cents for every dollar paid to white men, and Latina women being paid just 52 cents to every dollar. So, so that, again, I think that that is probably the most shocking information. And then, and I think also some of the data around how expensive childcare is in Virginia. We thank Virginia Voice for Virginia's Children for helping us with that research. But how expensive childcare is for working Virginians as well was quite shocking. So those are some of the highlights, but there's plenty more in the report.
I also wanted to add, Mel, you did just touch on that. Michael Pope from NPR is asking if you could expand on the Hispanic wage gap and any more numbers that you can share other than what you just shared?
Not beyond what I just shared off the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up with you and offer anything else that comes to mind outside of this press conference.
Great, I'll connect you with Mel, Mike. Anne Murphy, who is an advocate with VICPP, comments, "We're standing in the gap, ready to do the work. On this World Day of Prayer for Creation," oh, sorry, my screen just flickered. "We recognize that our brothers and sisters are a key part of creation. We hold all those who struggle economically on our hearts, rolling up our sleeves, raising our voices. Thanks for this report." I also wanted to just confirm that I did pop over to Facebook, and TCI is also sharing the live feed on their Facebook page, so I am monitoring both pages. Anyone who is watching this on Facebook, please feel free to ask your questions and they will be relayed to the speakers. All right, are there any other questions in the chat? I don't see any more questions in the chat. I am going to allow people a moment or two to type, and in the meantime, I'm going to share the links where the report will be going live and the email addresses where you can reach out to for more information. All right, and this will be emailed out. This information will be emailed out to all participants and anyone else who emails either Sherri or myself. And one last check. Last call for questions. Is there anything that the speakers would like to share before we close out that you feel like hasn't already been addressed?
You know, I just want to say, like, before the call, we were all talking about how much we love Virginia. It's such a great place. And again, we love it, and we think it could do a lot better for workers. And so I'm hopeful that this report will help move forward conditions for particularly workers in low-wage jobs. And we hope everyone has a lovely Labor Day weekend.
Thank you, TCI, for your partnership. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for your great questions and engagement. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.